answering questions.
Hey, it's good to have you with us for another great GRIP-Birkman Coaches Cafe. I say great because we're going to have John Blake talking to us about the subject of connecting and how important that is. And we're going to be able to talk about how that relates to GRIP-Birkman and our community, and how we how to help teams learn to connect as part of this process that we go through of moving from I to we. So, John, I appreciate you being here with us, and let's just dive into the article that you have written on the subject of connecting, where you use an illustration. I thought it was really interesting that you started out with that illustration about passing things off, being able to delegate things, and how that is connected to the idea of connecting. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think so often with a lot of things relationally, we really see them as quote unquote soft skills. We see them as things that they're nice to have, but they're not sort of mandatory. They don't really have a dramatic impact on how we do our work. It just makes us feel better when we do our work. And I think that we miss that something really significant when we stop there. We miss the significance of the application of what we've learned. And so with the idea of delegating, it's the idea that I'm applying the fact that I know less or can or match so well that I know that there are certain things that they just do better. There are things that are fatiguing for me that are life-giving for them. There are things that are opportunities for them to grow. And so when I can know them well enough, when I'm connected deeply enough that I understand those things and I'm not insecure then about my own things, there's an interdependence that is really empowering that comes from that.
So that being empowered relates to being self-aware also, right? That you've got to be self-aware first to know where your own strengths and needs and aversions are.
Yeah, I think this is if I had to think in terms of a continuum on this one, right? And
Yeah.
the idea of sort of what's sort of the problem that we might address initially. The problem that we're really getting after here is either I don't know myself and I don't really know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, so that lack of self-awareness, or this I just feel like if I'm a good team member, then I'm going to lean into everything. Right. And we see that a lot of times in sort of that over-eager volunteer type of thing, and not having that awareness. That's sort of the problem. And so, Larry, you said it, right? The first step then becomes this idea of self-awareness. Do I understand where I'm contributing uniquely, as well as where I have weaknesses, where I have needs, that actually give me opportunities to connect with others because they don't have the same needs, they don't have the same weaknesses, the same blind spots. And so how I come at that first, and that self-awareness then allows me to lean in a different way. The caveat that I will put on that, though, is that I think that oftentimes self-awareness becomes a goal in and of itself, and I think that that's a problem. Self-awareness is not the goal. Self-awareness only becomes a milestone or a checkpoint along the way to interdependence. It is not the end goal, because if I don't do anything with that, and if I don't lean into getting to know you and others in that same intentional way that I've tried to become self-aware about myself, am I becoming aware of the others around me, then I've missed it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you mentioning that, because we have had something of a shift in our focus with GRIP-Birkman coaches, particularly, where so much of what we were doing before was focused on helping people to do one-on-one individual coaching to help people understand themselves and understand their report. And where now we really are trying to focus more on team building, on the purpose of doing this as an individual is so that you can then be a better team player, you can be more effective, and getting really into that concept of moving from I to we. So I really appreciate you mentioning that the self-awareness is just the first step, that people are leaving something behind if they stay there, or they're not getting to where they need to go. But there's also that thing about, and you mentioned this, how part of that self-awareness is settling our relationship with Jesus. Unpack that a little bit more for me.
Yeah, I think as we think about things that will allow us to powerfully relationally connect with each other, uh, we have to look at the foundational elements first. And there are just some key foundations that have to be true. And we've discussed those in previous months, right? We've talked
Mm-hmm.
about them. And the foundational element is really that abiding. It's that relationship with Jesus. And the issue that comes up, especially in the connecting aspect, if that's not settled, is this search for significance. This fighting for I need to prove myself, whether that be to, we can take sort of the counseling to my past, to who I was, and to all of the things in my background I have to prove myself, or whether we take it to more of a right now climbing the ladder. I need to show that my worth, I need to prove my worth to my team, to the others that are around me, in that sort of way. And so if that abiding isn't settled, if that's not taken care of, if we don't understand that our significance is settled through Jesus, through the cross, then we're not going to be able to connect in an interdependent sort of way. It's going to stay at a superficial level, and I think we see that a lot. That I can be a good team. I can even be I'll even go as far as to say an efficient team, with staying at a surface level of that. The depth of interconnectedness, though, that requires a leaning in the weaknesses, in the needs, in the shared brokenness, is going to require that the abiding is truly settled, that the relationship with Jesus is settled.
So you refer to that as one of the three foundational elements, our settling our relationship with Jesus, abiding, and that abiding being not just as an individual abiding, but abiding also with others as we are together abiding in Jesus. And then that shared commitment, or the cooperative discernment, as I think Jen Vernon wrote the article that we have on that. And you also mentioned the holistic wellness. Are those on a continuum? Are they interconnected? How do all three of those things work together?
Yeah, all of these things are interconnected. And so, even as we talk about with GRIP-Birkman, we have this pull apart process to try to look at these pieces individually. We can't truly do that, right? They're too interconnected to truly be able to isolate all the way down. That being said, looking at the foundations of the abiding as the relationship set, then, and these are probably I would probably put these in sequential order as far as significance. The first one is, relationally, are we settled with Jesus? The second one then being, are we paying attention to that holistic wellness piece of it, or are we neglecting ourselves? And the reason I would put that one there is because if we're at a place of burnout, if we're at a place of self-neglect, of no boundaries, of not paying attention to those things, then mentally, I don't believe that we can lean in well into the shared direction, into where we're headed together. And I really don't think that we can sustain a solid connecting relationship if we're not in a place of wellness. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not in a place of brokenness, and it doesn't mean that we're not in a place at times of pain, but it means that we're not neglectful or disowning or saying that that's not relevant to it. I think there has to be an addressing of that. So those three foundational pieces then set the stage for how we live into the relationships, how we live into the connectedness.
A part of that wellness, you mentioned margin as part of or being a requirement for discovery. That if we don't have margin, we don't have time or energy or inclination, perhaps, to do the discovery that's necessary for us to be able to connect together. And really, this is the first time margin has come up, I think, in any of the articles that we've been reading lately. But margin related to wellness, related to that discovery process. Tell me why you thought that margin is so important. I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, for me, um, I'm watching a lot of people that are doing their work in a new way and um, that have adapted to a different pace, to a different cadence of life over the past 2 years. I get to work inside healthcare where insanity is as you would expect it to be over the past 2 years. And I just see how um, the disintegration of teams on a relational side has happened because there hasn't been the intentionality towards investing. Now they've adopted well that policies and procedures are changing on a weekly, if not daily basis for them, and they've been able to do that. But the reality of people being burned out, of people
Mm-hmm.
walking away from the industry, of people feeling disconnected even from our mission, which has always been sort of this foundation of who we are. There's a disconnect that's happened right now, and it's because we haven't had the margin to have the conversations about even what's happened, what is happening, what we want to happen in the future, and who you are, who I am, why that frustrated me so much, or why that's so painful for me, or why this is a more challenging or less challenging, or why I have hope or why I don't have hope. We don't have the room. We haven't created the room to have that conversation. And so, without that, we're assuming that we can just get better by doing our work together more. And I think that that's sort of the problem. It's we're not going to grow in connectedness just because we keep working together.
I know someone very intimately, and I'll get myself in trouble here if I'm not careful, but who sees margin as the white space on the page, and the reason it's there is so you can fill it in with more stuff. And how do we keep that balance of, yeah, I want to maintain margin, but I do have it there so that I can fill it with things that are necessary when they are necessary. How do you find that balance?
I think for this, I go back to Paul Ford, one of my mentors, and what how he defines team building, and team building is us sitting down and having the real conversation. Period. End of story. And so it's not creating an experience. It's not these different things. It's sitting down face to face and having the conversation. So margin in and of itself isn't going to do anything. And frankly, conversations in and of themselves won't result in anything. There has to be an intentionality toward that. And so is it white space margin that we're looking for? I trust me, I believe that's truly significant, especially in the holistic wellness component. For this connectedness, I think the margin though has to be filled with the intentional conversations, has to be filled with the intentionality of what will actually deepen our relationship, what will allow us to move forward together more effectively. And for some, that will be simply the how are you doing today? And that may be the right question. But for others, it may be very much more of a GRIP-Birkman type of question, which would be, hey, which of your needs have been challenged the most over the past 3 months? And how can we as a team serve you as you and honor you as we look to address that together? What would that look like? And so there's the margin creates space for the conversation, but the conversation has to be intentional toward an end and not just so that we're drinking tea together. The drinking tea together still has to have some meat attached to it.
So let me put this in a work context. Let's say I'm a team leader.
Mhm.
When I build margin into my day so that I can have time to connect with someone, and it's not just giving them a task or getting a report from them or passing them in the hall and saying, hi, I'm sorry, I'm so rushed to get to my next meeting. I don't even have time to say more than hi. I might not even have time to say hi. So in that setting, if a team leader is having some margin in his day, he can spend real time connecting with his team members on a relational basis that will then help the team to be healthier and more productive. Am I getting that right?
I think so. And I would probably take it even one step further. How can that team leader facilitate his team connecting with each other? Even if it's not a team meeting, what would be ways that he could spur one another on, right? How could he spur others to connect with each other? What is it that, you know, Matt and Ken are on this project together? Um, how can I ensure that they're connecting, that they're understanding what's important about each other? So, might I facilitate that through questions with Matt about Ken? Or might I facilitate that in saying, Matt, I've observed this in you. How is that impacting the project? And how have you communicated that to the project team? Things like that, where I can uh, ask those questions, where I can also then model some of my own vulnerability by saying, hey, here's what's been challenging for me, as well as then creating the safety for Matt to move forward. I think if you go back to last month, that idea of sharing, there's a boldness that comes when I know that I'm secure, that there's enough trust and safety in our relationship. Then I have a boldness to step out to a different relationship as well. So as a team leader, I can create that safety for individuals so that they know they can then go to others as well with that same sort of boldness.
Hey, let's try to put this in the context of GRIP-Birkman for a couple of minutes. How does this relate to GRIP-Birkman coaching specifically?
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea of connecting and what you've just been talking about.
Well, if I had one thing that I would challenge GRIP-Birkman coaches to, it would be to the application of the in the context of relationship. That if we stop at the self-awareness or what's been important to you from this discovery process, I would contend we need to push probably two steps further into how how will this impact your relationships in this, and how will this impact how you do your work specifically, as far as where you will lean in. What's something right now that you've maybe volunteered for that maybe you shouldn't have, or what's something that would be really intriguing to you to be a part of that's going on at your organization that you're not right now, that maybe you want to introduce to a team leader of, hey, what would it look like for me to be a part of that? And so I think there's that piece of it. I think the other idea of connectedness is, um, it's encouraging that we're doing these things in a group context. So from a GRIP-Birkman lens, I think it's understanding then what questions or what curiosity does this swell up in you that you want to find out about the others around you. And that's not, hey, how can we promote so that everybody takes the GRIP-Birkman? But I remember just having a conversation with a leader not that long ago, last month, where as opposed to saying, hey, let's really dig into your report, we really did the opposite and said, since you're here, let's talk about people that are on the other side, the other end of the spectrum. How might they perceive you, or what might be different about the way that they would do that? And if that's true and you've observed that, how did you respond, and how might you want to respond differently if you were going to try to honor them? And so it really allows us to, Again, what does GRIP-Birkman do? It gives us a common language to be able to talk about things. That's all that any assessment does, is the common language to be able to have the conversation. And so where can we take that conversation that's always around the self-discovery and spin it, even if I don't have their report, to say, if I were different, how might it look and feel different? And what would be the questions that I might ask then to discover more about other people? From that person that frustrates you, what do you think their motivation might be? That's a nice assumption. How could you validate that assumption, though? How could you actually have a conversation with that individual? So it's not getting stuck in the self-discovery piece, but it's creating a curiosity for those that you're wanting to be connected to.
All right, I'm thinking when we are doing team builds, one of the most significant things that we do is usually about the last thing that we do, which is affirmations. And we get the team doing that. And I think 100% of the time, that's a positive experience for people to feel that affirmation. And many times team members are bringing something from out of the past where it's obvious they have had a relationship with these people and they're affirming them for something that is very relational. I'm curious, how can we advise a team to keep doing that without it becoming routine? Every time we have a team meeting, okay, let's have affirmation time. And I'm sitting here struggling, trying to think of something to say affirming to everybody, and trying to come up with something creative. How do we make that real and get them to continue doing that without it becoming routine?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great question, and I do think it comes down to a bit of creativity on our part. Probably the easiest of that is to create some variance in the question. What's one thing that you've observed in the past week? What's one thing that you've observed in the work style of this individual? What's one thing that you've observed in the way that they interacted with another person, that you're sort of where you were the observer of an interaction? What's one thing that you personally felt from another team member? All of those things are essentially going to get us to a similar place of affirmation, but it's starting from it's creating a different lens on that. I think the other one is we know and value the affirmation time in a meeting. There are a lot of individuals that would prefer and that love to hold on to the notes. So how do we create a bit of the culture of affirmation through the written word as well? How do we create a bit of an affirmation environment or culture of the one-on-one? So, hey, for the last, for between this meeting and next, your task is to go and have one-on-one conversations of affirmation with at least one individual. And we're going to ask you in our next meeting whether or not you were able to accomplish that. And it is an expectation, right? So even when you're not doing it in that group setting, how can you still set some clear expectations for how as a team you want to do these different things? So I think there's some opportunities there. You're muted right now. Larry, you're muted. Larry, you're still muted. Just give him a minute. Hey, you're muted, Larry.
I just had such tremendous wisdom that I was sharing with the group here with my mic muted, that and there's no way it can be recreated. I'm sorry, guys, you just lost it. But no, but yeah, sorry about that. The whole idea of if meeting with that team leader after the team build, to give a little bit of post-meeting coaching, to give him some tips. Here are some ways to keep this going, so that this isn't just a one and done, or that was great, put it on the shelf again, but let's try to keep the fires going of this relationship building, because connecting and continuing to connect in the team is just so powerfully important for what we are talking about. Hey, John, I want to open it up. We've got a panel of guys here who are all gifted and experienced GRIP-Birkman coaches and trainers, and I know they've probably got some more comments or questions for you or for the group. So I really want you guys to open up your mics, and certainly John must have stimulated some of your thinking right now for you to have some questions or comments. So what might these be, or what for you was the most important part of the article if you've had a chance to read it, or if you're reading it even now, what's jumping out at you that you'd like to be sure we emphasize?
Well, John, I appreciate what you've shared here and the article as well. Um, the margin part really stood out to me. I hadn't thought of that in the connection of, because connecting seems like so much of a, hey, we need to work at it and do it. So creating space in order that it happens, I don't know, hadn't thought about that in those ways. And as you talked about some of the changes that have gone on, my mind immediately went to so much of our meeting is in forums like this, right? It's online, which almost the thing that gets shaved is not the business, it's the margin. And so sometimes we can't do anything about that platform. Have you experienced or seen ways that we can create margin in a virtual type of setting, since that's so much of our connecting? I mean, even our training, some of our team builds even happening on these sorts of ways. How do we create that when we're not sitting in a room having a coffee break? Because coffee breaks are my thing. I mean, that's the margin that I want. I want to just grab a cinnamon roll and chat, but how do we do it when we don't have that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it's one that a lot of us, continue to wrestle with. I won't say I have any great profound things probably that you haven't tried, but some of the things that we have and have done that are important are things like, having lunches together, or even if you're having an all day meeting or a little extended, that that you are having that sort of time to where there can be more of the open conversation. I think probably for the weekly meetings or for those types of things, um, it's really your two. I found that two different things have really huge impacts on it. One is showing up early to the meeting and making sure that it's a lively conversation as people are coming into the meeting. Just sets the tone in a really different way. And so being really intentional about that when those first people come in, how are you creating that interaction, that interplay, that dialogue, and whatever you want the meeting to be, if but really beginning to spark some dialogue as soon as the first people are arriving. That's really important. And I think the other is then how when you start the meeting and you are trying to create engagement, how are you doing that? What is that first question then that you're essentially going to require each person in the meeting to participate in, or that you're going to lean into every person, and how you do that? And I think there's two things with that, a few things with that I think become really important. One is, where do you want to position yourself as either the leader or the facilitator of that meeting? Do you want to position yourself as the person that's really guiding that, or do you want to position it more as a conversation? Because if you want it as more of a conversation, then it becomes things like, that was a great question. Les, give us your thoughts on that. Or, man, that reminds me of what happened to you last week, Larry, in that instance, and really starting to draw the connections there, that will just help them not feel as isolated in that. But I think that those two things I've found play a huge role in that. The reality then is the modeling of how you're connecting one-on-one with those individuals outside of it. That's sort of the group piece of it. But how and what's the most common way that your team is communicating? And for some it may be in the team's environment, for some it may be a group text, for some it may be that 2-minute phone call. But even having some of those conversations, what do we prefer as a team? If to have some of those, and proactively having some of those conversations and reflecting. We now have 2.5 years worth of data on this. When you've been able to stay connected, or when you felt connected to an individual, what was it? Did it require an hour-long coffee to really feel reconnected, or could it have been the affirmation of a text message? Hey, thought about you this morning, just wanted to shoot you a text. Have a great day. But really allowing people, again, that discovery, what works for you? How do we do this best in our context?
That's a great question you asked, Matt, because in the virtual world, even feeling like we have the opportunity to log on early and perhaps connect with some of the people on the team informally. I notice in most of the meetings that I'm in these days, people wait until the very last minute. It's like, okay, the meeting's at 8 o'clock. At 7:59, I log in, or maybe 8:01. And, we're in, and unless the leader is programming time in the meeting for that, then that informal connection is not taking place as much, is it? So finding ways to create those virtual water coolers can be really, really important, I think.
I think it does give margin, though, for the intentionality piece of it. It doesn't for the true water cooler. It's just harder, right? Mm-hmm. But the intentional sort of, hey, what's been significant for you this past week? In some ways, I think that's just as easy, if not easier, in this sort of environment, right? Because I can see every person's name on a list as far as who's in the meeting, or I can look at, around, and there's again, I don't want to overplay, but there's a bit of a protection, right? I'm in my own environment here, and so in some ways we can leverage that a little bit more, I think, as well.
Have we messed with our heads by using the phrase virtual too much? I mean, this is still face to face. You guys are 4 real men, and I'm having a real conversation with you. I mean, I'm using a virtual style tool, but this is no less one-on-one or one-on-4. I wonder if we've kind of weirded ourselves out. I mean, I've been tracking with a group of guys for almost 2 years now, and they're a mess. And I haven't been able to help them get that we're still connecting. We're still doing the same stuff. We just can't high five with a physical connection. And I think they've somehow convinced themselves that this is not real. This is not valuable. And I'm just wondering about that. I'm also wondering about white space and this space that we're talking about here. I love the concept of the margin kind of captures a lot of things. But I mean, for decades now, I've been using white space to protect me. Now I'm being challenged to create space for intentionality with connections. But I'm not going to call that white space. I have no idea, John, what to call it. But, I don't want it to get confused or replace the space that I've protected for protecting Les and Carol. So I have to figure out how to allow for that. I also have time where I guess I would call it other time. My wife, when we have to be someplace in 10 minutes, usually leaves 9 minutes before we have to be there. I leave 15 minutes. I allow time for people, other. I don't want to compromise that for this stuff. But so now I'm going to have a third kind of space or margin. And so I'm loving this, but it's now messing with my head. But the first thing I said is what I was hoping to hear back from you. Have we weirded ourselves out by setting this kind of a meeting in juxtaposition or against even a normal meeting? And so we walk away less Wes's than we might have if we were weird about it.
Yeah, this really is our reality today, and so we just have to accept it as our reality. And how do we leverage this reality to keep building the connections stronger and not allow this to be an excuse for the connections to fall apart?
I mean, I've been in dessert socials. We all brought our own dessert. We showed them on the screen. We ate, we had coffee, we shared, and it was powerful.
Yeah.
But we had to own that this was a real thing.
Yeah, I think it's different, for all of us that have been in cross-cultural settings, we learned early on that it's not better or worse, it's different. It's just a different thing. And I think that's a little bit of what this was. And I think initially, even going back to, Larry in the initial phase of all this talking about global culture shock, I think one of the things with culture shock is, well, it's bad, it's not what I'm used to, so it's bad. And yet if we start to think about it's not good or it's bad, it's just different, then we're able to see the pros and the cons of it. And I think you're highlighting potentially some of the pros of it. I mean, the reality of, Matt and I stayed connected before the pandemic sort of thing, but to be able to, hang out with my brother who's on the other side of the world on a weekly basis, that's pretty cool. There's certainly opportunities here in this. I mean, right now we're in, literally 3 different corners of the US and 2 different countries, among the 5 of us spending time. There are things that are possible now that aren't possible outside of this space. Is there still a difference of being in a room? Yeah. Body language is just different. I mean, I can see half of you, but I can read a room, and so again, it feels a little bit like I'll say it this way, which is probably, I feel like some of the superpower that some of us had of reading rooms and of really knowing how to easily draw in, that those have been lessened. There's a different way that you have to learn to facilitate, to engage, things like the question that Matt just had. How do we create that environment for a social interaction with something that started so formal? Those are things that we're still learning, and it's different. It's not good or bad, it's different. And so yeah, I'll pause there.
One of the things that I notice is a part of that difference is that I'm able to connect with the group. I think we are. I think, Les, you're right. There's a bit of we're able to talk on a topic and see each other. But in this setting, if I want to go talk to Larry about what he's doing this weekend, I can't do that without, taking over the whole group's conversation. So, and I'm kind of wondering there in that connecting, and I appreciate you mentioned some of the individual connection as a team leader to people, but that there is a connection as a group that needs to happen as a team, that we understand each other. We have this group understanding. But these individual connections, for me, is what I feel like is much more difficult in this type of forum. I can't have that one-on-one conversation on the side. I can't follow up on something that we knew about or something I've been praying with them about as easily without doing the intentional extra thing. But when we're talking connecting in general, to maybe take virtual out of it, how important is the group connecting and all the individual pieces of a group connecting with each other? Is that important, or to a lesser degree?
I don't know that I would say lesser. I think so. A lot of times, again, if we're thinking sort of continuum, there's this, I'm doing certain things as a team member, whether I'm a team leader or not, right? And then there's sort of this, I'm doing it and other people are doing it. And then there's we do it together. And then there's an expectation that it happens and it's just who we are, right? And I think if we think in terms of that continuum of it, then as a team member, I might not get to dictate what we do as a team and how we set and create expectations and create a culture of that. But I can lean into in a team meeting, just saying, hey, would love to hear how everyone in the, is, something that's going on, right? I can sort of lay that question out there, and I can connect with Larry and say, hey, on this project, I'm getting blurred a little bit. What are you covering? What am I supposed to be doing right here? And I think the word that you use, Matt, that I think is really important is the intentionality. I was just on a call yesterday with a pastor, and one of my questions was, in what I'm hearing, I'm curious, where's your heart in wanting to lean into this, and where have you already sort of said, I tried, it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, so I'm just letting it run its course, right? And that it wasn't a checked out, it was sort of an indifference to the way where things were at. And I think the intentionality tells us a lot about where we place value in this connecting. I know when I'm fatigued, the last thing that I want to do is lean into relationships. And so then it goes back to that. Am I in a place of wellness, of holistic wellness, to be able to lean in? But I know the value of intentionality in both environments. So I'm sort of going around your question. I think there's need for both. There's place for both. And if we actually get to a place where it's part of our team culture, then there would be clarity around expectation of both, as well. As we're starting into this, I would say that the one-on-one is probably more important than the group. But that's just because if you and I can model something together and we can show what it looks like for it to happen well, of that, then others on the team will have a curiosity and an intrigue about how we're doing it and why did it happen and how did it happen. And I think back, Larry, to your example that you use of saying, hey, spend time, get to know each other and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm just having a couple of ideas floating through, John, about some possibilities like pairing people together for a project, a short project, and they have to get together outside of this meeting. And so when they get together, if we've modeled, they're going to ask each other the real "how are you doing" question, and they really want to know, how's it been this week? What's been going on in your life? They get the opportunity to do that, and we shift them around. If that would take a whole lot of creativity in terms of where our strengths are, but it might be that a team leader would want to do that as part of their team building to say, hey, the assignment is Matt and Ken, by next week, I want you guys to have just gotten together and just had a conversation. And there's no framework for it. There's nothing, just you guys get together and have a conversation. And I imagine some people would do it because they were told to, and it's like, well, all right, we're here. I don't know what to talk to. Do you know what to talk about? No, I don't know either. Well, okay, at least we can tell them we did it. Have a great day. I'm sure some people would take that attitude toward it, but something that gets us connecting on a one-on-one basis more so that we are actually relating to each other. Because I know that with all of you guys on this call right now, I have had some time to be working on some project where we have spent a little bit of personal time together working on that project, and it has contributed to our connectedness.
And I would even take it one step further as far as, if that feels again, if that feels more soft than what you would want, then even say, okay, here's the project, bucket out the major tasks that need to be done under that, and then identify which of you will do them, will own them, knowing that we want you to stay within what is bringing you joy, or and power and fruit, if we use those words even, or we use the idea of 65-35, lean into areas where you feel that you have gifting or passion or calling, and understanding that somebody still has to take out the trash, whichever you want to do, but then say, break it down. In that team, your first task is not to give me a project plan of your deadline and your timeline and all that. I want to see clarity on who's going to be owning each part, so that I understand that you've really had a conversation about what you're bringing to this project. And those sort of things, in addition then to what Larry just said on a weekly basis, hey, your first 15 minutes of your check-in meetings that are an hour need to be just checking in on how you're doing this week. so that you can understand where you might need to lean in a little bit more, where you might need to, help out each other in a new way.
Yeah. That brings us back to the first thing that you mentioned in the article about delegating. That can, if we're doing that effectively, that does contribute to our connectedness, doesn't it?
And it does, and the second piece there was really the proactive nature of certain conversations.
Yeah.
Because this is not always going to go well, and there are going to be points where there's confusion, or and it's not even always based in significance, but just frustration over, I had that, or you didn't do that, or these different things. I even think of a time, Larry, where you came back and said, "Hey, you delegated that to me. Let me handle it." Right. And that those sort of things then really help shape relationship, because then it's a matter of, okay, I'm gonna trust that individual to do that, or that was what we had said, or we weren't clear on something. So you can have those proactive conversations so that you're not having to do cleanup on the back end.
There you go. Ken, I've never known you to sit silently this long, but I can tell by your facial gesture, I can read your body language enough to know that you're thinking there, and I just want to hear the thought that needs to come out, brother.
Well, this has been, I've really enjoyed this article. John, I think that you really kind of made us think. That you guys have touched on a lot of things. One of the things that really has got me thinking as I read this article the other day when you came is the very end of your article. You say that independence results in Christ revealing unity. When a team consistently functions interdependently, Christ is honored. I think that most of us have seen interdependence as equivalent to a three-legged race. When you and I can just get both of us get our leg together into the three-legged race so that we can work together, that must be an interdependence. And this is saying no, actually interdependence is allowing people to do what they do best and free them to do that. That's a very different view of interdependence than I think typically we think of in a team. So we think of, okay, interdependence is us all agreeing on what we together are doing. And this view of interdependence is our unity is really not that we're all doing the same thing. In fact, our unity is that we're all doing our own thing together towards a common goal. That's the unity. That's a very different perspective on our God-given unity. And I really enjoy it. I just found myself getting to the end of that article going, good article, and then get to this and go, that is a new way of expressing something that I think that I hadn't really worked through in my mind, this understanding of interdependence and unity. So
well, the article is on the GRIP-Birkman homepage, Connecting. It's easy to find it down at the bottom of the opening homepage there. You can go to that. John, thank you for including some hyperlinks for us. If you click on those hyperlinks, you'll go to other resources, other articles that are related, and see how this all is interconnected and has relevance in several different areas. And John, I really do appreciate the evaluative statements that you gave us at the end there. Would you just walk us through those real quickly as we close out and talk about how a team would use these evaluative statements?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my participation is informed by my personality, gifts, needs, as well as those of the team. So on, just thinking through on a scale of 1 to 5, how are you doing at leaning in to those areas? Do you have that self-awareness to understand where you should be leaning in and where you should be stepping back and allowing others in there? And how are you facilitating and encouraging others to do the same in that process? So that's sort of I'll say the I piece of it, but as again, if we talk about a little bit of this continuum, the idea of how am I doing my part in this shifting from I to we. The second one is we regularly spend time as a team getting to know each other's strengths and weaknesses so that we can work together more effectively. Are we intentionally leaning in together? So the first one is sort of how am I contributing to this? The second is as a team, is it in place? Are we creating the margin? Are we having the intentional questions that we see are leading us to an action-oriented connecting, an action-oriented interdependence? And then the third one, our team values, affirms, and optimizes each other's unique contribution. And I think that that's where we begin to see it as part of the culture. When a new person comes into the team, is there that intentional sort of leaning into, man, we really got to find out what's unique and how they're going to fit within this. How are we understanding that the other people that are really different than us, that they are adding value? I think of team styles, and what are those that potentially rub us the wrong way, as well as those that are in our need area? How do we lean into some of those things? And then the idea of optimizing, I think, really then comes down to how are we creating better role clarity, better opportunities based on our unique designs, and really allowing people to be in places where they can thrive, so that they're not doing things that they're average at where others could be thriving in those spaces.
That's fantastic. Very practical helps that we can share with a team leader that can really go a long way, I think, to helping teams to learn to connect even more on the one-on-one basis, and then how that creates unity in the team, which is what we're all about. John, thank you again for being here. I think this is a subject we're going to have to circle back around to often. The connectedness is connected to all of the other values, and so we're definitely going to have to come around to this one again. Meanwhile, we've come to the top of an hour again. It's been a great conversation. Thank you to our panel for participating with us and for all the insights you've helped us to gain. Just remember that we're here every month, the first Wednesday at the same time, and the recordings are on the YouTube channel for GRIP-Birkman Coaches Cafe. And the articles are always available there. They're permanently there on the GRIP-Birkman website, so you can go and read all of these articles, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Meanwhile, just keep doing everything you can to build unity in the body of Christ so more people will know Jesus. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.